to this meeting of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee A, which will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be placed on the Council's website as soon as is practicable following this meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure mobile phones are switched off or on silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may leave their cameras on at that point. But please, could I ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help minimise any background noise and interference, and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top of the Microsoft Teams window, and I'll come to you in the order I received requests. Please lower your hand once you finish speaking, and the chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I would also like to ask that the officers introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now go to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
None, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please?
No.
Thank you. Item 3, the approval of the minutes for the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee A meeting on the 18th of March 2022.
Chair,
sorry, Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I wasn't a member of the authority during this meeting, but I was an objector in that meeting, so attended it and viewed it. And I'm happy to say that the minutes are an accurate record of that meeting, if that helps.
Andrea, can we accept that?
No, you have to have the people that were present to accept the minutes.
Right, there's nobody here present that was in that meeting.
So they can't be approved then.
Right, okay, thank you. And item 4 on the agenda, Licensing Act 2003, application to vary a premises licence under section 34. And can I ask Kirsty to come in, please, just to give us some key points? Thank you.
Before she does that, Chair, you haven't done the introductions?
Sorry, that wasn't on my... if I can ask the guests to introduce who they are.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Walati Rator. I'm here to represent the applicant today, and with us, I'll do the introduction for Nazir Georges, who is here on behalf of the applicant company. Nazir will not be speaking today, but obviously is here to assist with any, but be mainly myself that will be representing the applicant today.
Thank you. Can I ask the officers to introduce themselves, please?
Hi, my name is Andrea Lee. I'm the clerk to the committee.
Thank you.
I'm Mark Galvin, and I'm taking the notes of proceedings today.
Kirsty Evans, Licensing Policy Officer, and I'll be presenting the report.
Thank you. And can I ask the councillors present to introduce themselves, please?
Well, I'll go first then. My name's Councillor Jonathan Pratt, and I'm a member of the licensing committee to decide on this this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Betso? Your mic is off. Mike, do you know what's happening?
Councillor Bledsoe, are you there? Please.
Did it
Councillor Betso has just messaged me. He says he can't unmute his microphone.
Oh, same as me. Can apologies to the applicant. We've having some technical difficulties. Maybe if he logs in and back out. Because I had problems earlier, so that's what I did.
And
Yeah,
while we're waiting for Councillor Bledsoe, my name is Maxine Lewis and I'm the chair of the licensing committee.
we can't get Councillor Bledsoe's mic unmuted.
Has he tried logging out and back in?
I think that he needs to probably do that. I think Councillor Pratt is going to tell him, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm on it. So he says he can hear everything, but hopefully he will log out and log back in shortly.
Technology is all well and good till something goes
I
wrong,
know.
isn't it?
It's a bad day today, I think. Mark, Councillor Betso still seems to be on the screen.
Say it again, sorry,
Yeah,
Andrew.
I'm
Councillor
getting
Betso.
running. I think his computer's frozen, so
Oh,
he's
so he
restarting
can't
the
log
laptop.
out.
Yeah, so he's
Right, okay.
restarting the laptop, and he'll so yeah, I think he may turn up twice. So
Okay.
if that's stalled.
Michael, can you just take him out to the meeting from your end anyway, so that might make it easier. Mark, is Mike doing the electronics?
Yes, yeah.
He's not answering when I'm asking him questions.
Sorry, Andrea. My internet's all over the place today.
Oh, you were having trouble as well. Can we? All right, he's out now. Is he right? Okay, so that
Yeah,
might
he's
make
out
it
now.
easier.
I'd
That might
taken
make
him
it
out
easier for him to come back in, right? Okay.
now. A lot of little difficulties today for some reason.
Yes. Oh, look like Councillor Bledsoe, is your microphone working now?
I hope so. I really don't know what
Excellent.
happened there. It just went absolutely nuts. It told me I was leaving, but I could still hear you all. But no, I'm here now.
Excellent, thank you. If you could just introduce yourself for the applicant and the recording, please, that would be great.
Thank you. And sorry to everyone for what happened then. Councillor Stephen Bledsoe, Bridgend Central Councillor and on the Licensing Committee.
Thanks, Steve. So could I bring Kirsty in now, please, to just give us a rundown of the key issues, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so the purpose of this report is to determine an application that has been received from AXA Trading Limited to vary the premises licence in force at Domino's Pizza, Unit 1, Summerfield site, Tremaines Road, Bridgend, CF311TZ. So the premises currently benefits from a premises licence authorising the provision of late night refreshment from Monday to Sunday from 2300 hours to 0300 hours. And a copy of the current premises licence can be found in Appendix A of your report. The application that we received to vary the premises licence can be found in Appendix B of your report. But the request is essentially to firstly modify condition 1 of the premises licence, which is found in Annex 1. So it wants to change from the counter service open to the general public will only be available until 0100 hours, Monday to Sunday. Thereafter, no public access will be permitted for late night refreshment via the delivery service. So they want that changed to the premises shall remain closed to the public between 0100 to 0300 hours, except to allow delivery service and for access to authorised persons. The request is also to remove 3 conditions under Annex 3 of the premises licence, which are no delivery vehicles will be mopeds. All drivers will have a label in their cars stating do not slam car doors or rev engines or play loud music. And no more than 2 delivery vehicles will be used after 2300 hours. Everything else to remain the same. The applicant hasn't offered any additional measures to promote the licence objectives, but has stated these premises are already licensed with sufficient robust set of conditions which will remain on the premises licence after modification of the conditions. So in accordance with the requirements, copies of the application were sent to the responsible authorities. It's been advertised in accordance with the relevant regulations. And during the consultation period, we received 1 representation, which is from a local resident. Understand that the objector isn't here today, but a copy of their representation can be found in Appendix C of the report. So as we've received a relevant representation, the subcommittee must determine the application in accordance with the Licensing Act. And we've only received 1 other bit of additional information, and that was from the applicant, which should have been circulated to committee members. And that was in relation to delivery vehicles arriving at the premises. So I'm sure the applicant will refer to that later. So moving to the recommendations, the subcommittee is asked to determine the application having regard to the Council Statement of Licensing Policy, the guidance issued by the Home Office under Section 182 of the Licensing Act, and the application submissions and the representations before them. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody want to ask anything? I mean, as far as I can see, everything was laid out quite clearly. Does anyone have any questions for the applicants? Right, Councillor Pratt.
Okay, sorry, it's the applicants now put their case and then you ask questions.
Oh, sorry. Right, so can I ask the applicants then to come in and just put their case to the committee?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Kirsty for that report. I'll present the case now. What I want to say at the outset, and as a summary of our case, is this: that the application should be granted as applied for, because we say there is no real or real substantiated evidential basis for refusing the application to effectively modify the conditions. And we can only do what is right in law for today's purposes, and also take into account what is relevant and substantiated evidence. And when I say a right in law, I do, of course, mean, as Kirsty has also said, the Licensing Act, the statutory guidance, your policy, and of course, as it's interpreted by case law. Now, the issues in this case are fairly straightforward, but I think it'll be helpful for everybody to set out the background to the application and also to put it into some perspective. The starting point to note is that this is not an application for a new premises or later hours. We already have those authorised under the existing premises licence. And this is where it appears that the one resident that has put a representation in against this application may be somewhat confused in their representation. And equally, this is not an application for a review. What it is an application to modify conditions to either, and this relates to the first of the four conditions issued today, is to better word and clarify the existing conditions, just so it makes a bit more sense and there's some clarity, but essentially the condition doesn't actually change. And the second reason, and this relates to conditions 2 to 4, is to remove what are more of the obscure or even, dare I say, absurd conditions which have no real purpose or are unnecessarily restricted. We had a conversation with the licensing officer who expressed their view that perhaps it is time for this license effectively to be tidied up, for want of a better phrase, and hence the application. Now, the applicant is a multi-site Domino's franchisee, which of course is a global brand. They have around 40 stores in England and Wales, and most of them are in the Wales region. They employ over 1,200 employees, and in fact that figure is now creeping towards 1,500, including area managers and office-based staff who deal with things on a daily basis, such as admin, property, HR, and office-based licensing issues as well. So the point of all that is that it is an organised and a very professional organisation who know this industry well. They also have several premises which have a premises license for premises in a similar location to this, and they operate those successfully without the conditions we are seeking to modify. So there is a strong record, a proven record of working within this industry across various premises, again, without those conditions. The operators, the company, have the internal procedures where they operate late in similar locations, and those procedures include, for example, that they close the front of the store when it is operated for deliveries only, and they turn off signage, lighting, etc., and that's designed to prevent people congregating outside the premises when it is closed to the public for them to come into the store. And they also have staff and drivers who are instructed to work in a respectful and quiet manner. And as I've said, they have a proven track record in this industry in England and Wales, and have a good working relationship with the responsible authorities. Talking of responsible authorities, it is significant to note that the environmental health team has not made a representation in relation to this application, and we say that casts doubt on the one representation that has been made by the local residents. And also, this should be given significant weight because, as you'll be aware, that the environmental health officer, the environmental health team, should be viewed as the main source of advice on matters concerning public and noise nuisance. And adding to that, we say that it is equally significant that neither the police or any of the other responsible authorities, for that matter, have not made a representation. So to take that all together, what it means is that the main statutory authorities and experts have considered the application and have decided, in their opinion, that there are no issues with this application being granted. Now, moving on to the one representation that has been made. This resident has done nothing but complain since we took over the premises about 12 years ago. They initially objected to the planning application, but that was granted despite their objections. And unfortunately for us, they have continued to complain to the authorities, and the operators have cooperated with the authorities and the inquiries on each occasion. There were issues, for example, that were raised earlier 2017, and complaints were made to the council regarding food delivery lorries arriving on site before 7 a.m. and after 11 p.m. But this was resolved by making adjustments with the delivery times, working with Domino's at headquarter level. So something that was fixed quite easily in response to that. The most recent of these complaints regarding food delivery lorries coming to the site were made earlier this year. Again, these were investigated by the council officers, and again, we cooperated and proved those allegations to be incorrect by checking CCTV with the officer in question and also producing official delivery time logs. And those, I think, you've seen evidence of in the additional material that we submitted before this hearing today. So all in all, it's been a very long period, years in fact, for complaints to have been made by this one single resident, which is then investigated by the authorities. And then, despite all that, for nothing of any real substance to be found to undermine the licensing objectives. And this is what this is all about today. Certainly, there's not been anything enough for the responsible authorities to make a representation against this application. And that's quite telling and should be given significant weight, as I've already mentioned. If anything, the applicant company understandably feels that it's now a case of victimization and calculated harassment, if you like, towards them, and that's their feeling. Now, in terms of the location of these premises, this is not part of the main representations we're making today, but I think it is important to comment on the actual location and how the objector sits with us, etc. So would say it's worth bearing in mind, and I'm not sure if you know this, but immediately to the right of the premises, there is a very busy 24-hour petrol station, and vehicles from the same side of the premises who want to turn into the petrol station do so by angling towards the front of the the residents' premises, and then they continue past the front of the applicant's premises and then straight into the forecourt of the petrol station. And this sort of happens in a very quick, smooth move, and is possible because this effectively dropped curves along the front of all those premises. So the point that we are making here is that there are substantially more vehicles going across the front of the residents' premises and the applicant's premises to use the petrol station than they will ever be by the controlled and managed use of delivery drivers, which we have some control over. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is also, unfortunately for the resident, a mainline railway from Paddington to Swansea, I understand, directly behind their premises with very late train times. Okay. In terms of the representation itself, and as alluded to during the course of our presentation today, it's not really about the likely effect of the grant of the application on the licensing application. And I say that because they seem to be treating this as a new or a variation application for later hours. There is no direct comment in relation to the conditions being modified, and therefore we say there is a strong argument that there is actually no objection to what we are effectively applying for, and therefore the application can also, for that reason, be safely granted. And the reasons for the modifications to the conditions are this. The first one, as I say, is simply to improve the wording of the condition. And the second one is in relation to mopeds, which seems a little bizarre and unnecessarily restrictive without serving any real purpose. The third one is in relation to labels in cars, and again is unnecessary, and it's not always practical for this type of business because drivers, vehicles change, and it's quite common to use a diverse range of delivery services. And again, it's not something that I understand the enforcement officers concern themselves with too much. It's mainly about making sure that we do train and instruct our drivers properly, which works better, and we do, and it's proven to work in their other premises. And the fourth one is simply for business flexibility, and that's okay under the licensing regime. There's nothing wrong with having flexibility in your business to help grow, especially where there is no substantiated evidence to back up effectively the allegations being directed at the premises. And it's not something that in itself undermines the licensing objectives. Chair, as I've alluded to throughout, this is a fairly simple and straightforward application, and therefore I've tried to sort of confine everything to those concise points, and that's all we intend to say in our opening, and we are happy to deal with any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rathore. Right, so councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously, as you'll understand, I wasn't on the licensing committee when this original license was made. I understand where you're coming from on the objection, Mr. Rathore, but I mean, I will give it its consideration, what it's due. My question would be is obviously you want to remove the conditions, mopeds, the labels in cars, and the restriction on 2 delivery vehicles after 11. My question would be is what does Domino's Pizza in this area. I mean, I'm a fan of Domino's. They deliver in Porthcawl. They're great. I don't know whether that's a declaration of interest, but it's you know. But I don't give great stock into who actually delivers the pizza themselves. So are these employees directly by Domino's, or is it? I mean, we've got new thing, Just Eat, Deliveroo, all these things. So I mean, would the argument be a case of you are losing control over your delivery drivers because you're using other companies to deliver your pizzas? And if there are complaints from individual to individual delivery drivers, what actions do the owners take to rectify any concerns that the residents do? If they are slamming their doors, they're playing loud music in their cars, this, that and the other. I just wonder if we're going to remove this part of the license, that there are safeguards in place that if the franchise does receive complaints, that they do tackle them in a timely and proper manner. And that's my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I will answer that, and thank you for that. And I hear where you're coming from. Essentially, what we're saying here is, we're removing conditions. Are we taking away something that was helping perhaps beforehand? The starting point, I would say, is that these are the type of conditions that we're taking away. That if we ever did a survey across licensing enforcement officers across the country, they would be thinking, yeah, they do seem a little bit obscure, a little bit absurd, so we can do away with those. But in terms of safeguarding residents in the area, we go back to what our procedures are, which work for about 40 of our premises across the estate, where we do train our drivers to respect the needs of the local residents. But having said that, and as you've alluded to, we don't control all the drivers, because post-pandemic we live in a world where we do use other platforms, and they have their own procedures as well. We understand Uber Eats, for example, they have their own stringent procedures as well. I don't know exactly what those procedures are, but we do know that there are procedures in place to deal with those. So yes, our control over those is somewhat diluted. But having said that, and the key point today is allegations that have been made against these premises over a period of years and investigations have never got to a point where anything was found of any substance. So we do work with the authorities. We will take on board complaints. We will look into those. We do things like check CCTV, and if they're complaining, you know, we're doing things out of time. We will look at the official logs, and if there is an issue, we will deal with it. But there's never been an issue here, and which I find astonishing, over so many years that's been investigated by your colleagues in the council, which has led to action being taken. And the fact that the responsible authorities, who no doubt have been involved in investigating these things, have not made a representation to this application, speaks the loudest. That they don't see anything of any substance. They will have known the history of these complaints. And noise nuisance is a two-stage process. Before you can deal with noise nuisance, you have to establish that there is a noise nuisance. And if there is one, and the allegations amount to something, then you put in measures in place. And what we're saying is our measures do work. And if there was anything other than, shall we say, vexatious complaints, then we would look at it differently. We rely on our training of our own staff, who we use primarily. But if there was an issue with other drivers, again, we will deal with that in a more substantive matter, rather than rely on a sticker on the dashboard of a car, for example.
Councillor Pratt, are you happy with that?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. So I mean, in my view, I'm sure Mr. Attoll will agree with me. If there are complaints, they could be dealt with internally, whether that's a sackable, offence by the driver or a termination of a contract with another delivery company. I'm more than satisfied, and that's where we'll go with it, and I'll make my decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bledsoe.
Thank you, Chair. And with your permission, I haven't muted my microphone or turned my camera off for fear
That's
of
fine.
neither coming back on again. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mr. Attoll for his presentation and for joining us today. And I'd personally like to thank the applicant himself for the continued investment that he makes in our area and the jobs that he creates. I would also like to confirm to Mr. Attoll that I've read the objection. It doesn't relate to the matter in hand. It's quite evident to see from the outset that it is a person that doesn't want the applicant to be there at all, rather than vary the conditions. So I have paid due consideration to that, which I'm sure you can see is not much, because it doesn't relate to the matter that we're discussing. I share Councillor Pratt's concerns in relation to the new world that we live in the completely generated market of deliveries by large conglomerates that insert themselves into a process that used to be managed more locally. My concern within the industry is that all takeaway premises, including the one in question, don't have the element of control that they used to have over delivery drivers, as in if the client, the applicant here, had an issue with a delivery driver who was willingly or willfully breaching acceptable levels of noise, be it revving cars, playing music, or just being antisocial, not to the level of ASB, but in the broader sense of the term antisocial. What checks and balances are in place for organisations like this to deal with unruly delivery drivers who work for these companies? Because obviously I'm aware that somebody has an app on their phone, it comes through, the premises gets a notification, they take it away, percentages are paid here, there and everywhere. But if this premises has a problem with the driver, what are the recourse actions here?
Okay, thank you very much for your question, and thank you very much also for the comments at the outset. You're absolutely spot on, and it's music to my ears that you're considering this application for what it actually is, and recognise the relevance or non-relevance, for want of a better phrase, between the representation and this application itself. Yes, there is this global issue in this new world that we live in. We would say is we will have a zero tolerance towards any driver that causes issues for local residents. And the issue here is nothing's ever been found which has caused us concerns after investigations have taken place and after working with the experts who are your colleagues within the council. Had there been, we are 40 strong stores with working with a global brand which have their own strict procedures, and they've got a brand to protect. Had there been any issues, we would take action. We would look into it, and if it was found that certain drivers weren't operating to a certain standard, whether it's with us or whether it's through a third-party company, we would be looking to part ways with them, and it's not something that we would tolerate, because it's not something that we would risk jeopardizing our reputation, the business of this site, which also obviously reputationally could have an effect on other premises in our portfolio. We are very strong. We are predominantly operating in the South Wales area. I know this because I've dealt with many of their premises, in fact, all of them. And we are here to work and serve the communities the best we can and not cause them any form of noise or other nuisance. So the reassurance we're given is our robust training procedures internally, but also a zero tolerance towards any third-party companies who is not operating to a standard which promotes the licensing objectives.
And Chair, if I may, thank you for that, Mr. Rator. If I may, as Councillor Pratt has intimated, I don't think any of us were councillors when the original approval was given and these conditions were put on. And this may be somewhere that officers may be able to give us historical information. At the time, these conditions would have been put on for a reason, and any variation on those have to be considered on the basis of where we are now. You know, the variation of the condition number 2 about the sticker, I don't know if that's enforceable anymore because of the third-party delivery companies that we now use. You can't go to Just Eat or Deliveroo and say you want this in there, and you can't refuse the delivery on the basis that they don't have it. My bigger concern is the third variation that you're looking on the matter of 2 vehicles after 11 o'clock. My concern based around that is just for a possible declaration. This is my local Domino's, that is my local petrol station, so I know the area extremely well. My concern would be is the industry of these third-party delivery companies after 11 o'clock using a forecourt to congregate whilst they wait for orders to come in. So there is, from memory, about 5 parking spaces in front of the property where the big window is and 3 or 4 to the side where the door is. My concern would be is that the area would be used by a team of delivery people who operate after the time, that they would sit on the forecourt and wait for orders, whether they be from you or, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys, there's a Papa John's up the road that has less parking. So the area would be used as a congregation place if the restriction is removed. So I don't know if officers are able to help me here in relation to are these conditions matched with other local food outlets that we have the same conditions so that we have parity, but also as well what can be done to try and remove that? Because my concern, Mr. Rator, is that whilst this is a commercial property and as you pointed out is next to another commercial property, it is a residential area, it's surrounded by housing, and you've mentioned the railway line behind. The other side of the railway line is an Asda, and Asda have imposed on them a condition that their big green light has to be turned off after a certain time because it recognizes as a residential area. So what I'm looking to do personally is to find that balance between a successful, growing and loved food outlet in the area and the needs of the residents as a whole. So I don't know if officers can help me on that as well, please.
Mr. Rathore, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just before the officers assist you with that, I like yourself, I wasn't involved with I've been working with this company for a long time, but this predates my involvement as well. In licensing generally, as you know, applications are granted not necessarily because they go through to a hearing and then conditions are imposed. Sometimes it is because conditions are volunteered in operating schedules. And certainly in the early days when we didn't quite know the Licensing Act as well as we did today, there was a temptation for operators to put things in there. Too much thought about how it might impact in the future, whether it's strictly necessary, etc., etc. And we had all sorts of conditions go on there. People wanted to do the right thing. They would put in things like we'll collect glasses every 30 minutes without realizing that you know, even if they were only 5 minutes late, they were technically in breach of a condition. So conditions have ended up on there for all sorts of reasons, and some of the conditions were hangovers from the 1964 Act. I think it's a good question. I think the officers, if they can assist with that, that would be helpful. But I would go back to the point about no evidence of any wrongdoing, for want of a better phrase. And I would also, after the officers have had an opportunity to address your question, Councillor, also for perhaps the applicant himself can directly tell us if there is any way of preventing other people from congregating on what's effectively their premises. We don't want other people. We certainly don't want Papa John's or any other competitor parking on our premises, and that's nothing against Papa John's or other operators. And I share your concern, or I understand your concern, but I think it'll be highly unlikely that they can have free reign over our premises. But I will allow the officers to have a say. And
just for clarity, see, Mr. Ritor, is that this is where I'm coming from with this, and I understand why you're seeking the variation on the conditions, but I'm wondering whether that condition works. That condition achieves what it's trying to achieve, and that's what I have to consider when we're looking at the variation. Sure. So I can take each variation request on its own merits. I'm just wondering whether that one needs to potentially be retained for a multitude of reasons, and that's the reason. That's where I'm coming from on it. That's why I asked.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Just to answer that point. We do want that to come up because we certainly will have more than 2 of our own drivers there, but it won't be free reign for other people to use. So, but I'll hand over to, or I'll allow the officers to respond to that also.
Kirsty, is there any information?
I was just going to just pick up on that point and just say that, yeah, each application should be judged on its own merits. So although this condition may be consistent with other licensed premises in the area, we need to today look at this application on its own merits. What do councillors think of the representation that has been submitted, and do they think that based on that, unfortunately the objector isn't here to answer any questions today, so that would have been a good question to put to them, is do you think this condition is currently working? But unfortunately they're not here. But yes, we just have to take each application on its own merits.
Councillor Bledsoe, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I am, and I totally understand what Kirsty's saying and agree with her. I'm just trying to find that right balance that works for the applicant, for the residents, for the business, for the nighttime economy. I mean, I'm at the age now where if I eat a pizza at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to wake up feeling worse. I don't have a very forgiving body anymore. But I have been, I've been out in Swansea and I've been there at 12:30 and enjoyed a pizza quietly in my car. So I'm just trying to find that balance on where we are with this.
Can I make some representation on this? I think your question is with regard to maybe if we got Just Eat and you haven't got control over them, and if we have more than 2 drivers after 11, there'll be some issues. I've had this representation from the local residents since I started with Domino's in 2017. I'm the head of the projects and properties that deal with licensing as well as planning. From day one, I think we had these issues, which was investigated fully with the various officers. I think I got involved maybe about at least 5-6 times over the years. And the residents, I've always said to the officers, get the resident to contact us directly, and we deal with this issue internally. If anything, we've got CCTV and everything else, and if we find any issues relating to noise or nuisance, anything like that, we always give the drivers first a warning and then subsequently a written warning and then sacked. So we haven't really, in this particular store, we haven't really had many issues like that. But in terms of, for example, I think you're alluding to Just Eat, and no, we don't have any control over them. With regard to our drivers, I think the representation here is to increase them from 2 after 11 o'clock, maybe to 4 or 5, depending on the business. If it's just, I'm not sure for this site. I don't think we have Just Eat at the moment. But I mean, if in the future, if that's the way we've gone through it, we obviously will have also control over them. I.e., we have another 2 stores, and that is not really particularly will affect our business. If we go back to Just Eat or whoever it is and say, look, your drivers are a nuisance, we give them a warning, and subsequently we can say, well, they didn't heed the warning, and we don't want you anymore on the site. So really, we have control over every single aspect of the business, including all the drivers, all the in-stores, all the managers. So what I say to the local residents, instead of contacting the council, I'm sure the council officers are extremely busy and they don't want to be contacted. I'm sure over the years they must be contacted at least 50 times, maybe more. Just to write to us, because we have a department for concerns. If they write to us, we'll fully investigate it and find, if any reason we find any particular driver or in-store playing loud music or anything to that effect causing nuisance, we will reprimand them. I mean, it's not like somebody has something to say, well, we can't do anything to us. There's a lot of guidelines within our business, including training all the time. I mean, I see it. I don't want to get involved in training, but I see the officers who do that. They're extremely good, and all these issues comes out. So if anything like that, I mean, I'm happy to answer any of the complainant representations.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just following on from Councillor Bledsow's questions. In relation to the 2-car delivery limit, would it be fair to say that in reality you've probably lost control of that restriction? I mean, we've gone back in the day where you had to phone up Domino's to order a pizza. Now that's gone. You've got, I mean, I'm sure you still can do it, but you've got the Domino's app and you've got the Just Eat app and the Deliveroo app, and you don't want to refuse orders, because that makes you look bad. To say, well, you've rejected my order at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm never going to use you again. This sort of thing. Whereas, I mean, when you had control over your own apps and telephone calls, you could stagger delivery times, so you could keep it to the 2. But with all sorts of other delivery apps and companies, that in reality you've probably lost that control. So it's just, as the orders are coming in, you've got to get the pizzas cooked, you've got to get them out within a reasonable time. I mean, you get the adverts from Domino's, like, order your pizza now, it will be delivered to you by half time at the football, this sort of thing, and which obviously isn't material to this current license, because football's not on at 3 in the morning. But it's that sort of thing. So you want to get your pizzas out in a timely manner, you want it when people are expecting it. So would it be fair to say that I'm sure you were trying your best to keep this thing, but in reality, as the markets have moved, that you have lost control of this and it's being very difficult to maintain? Would that be an accurate view?
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge for not just this store, but every store of every type of fast delivery or quick service delivery in the country, England and Wales, or anywhere else for that matter. It's the world we live in.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I just thank you very much, Mr. Rattor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Councillor Bledsoe, you have another question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's based on something that the applicant just said. It's a question for Andrea specifically. The applicant just mentioned then about varying one of the conditions rather than removing it, with increasing it from 2 to a different number. Is that within our gift today, or is the question to remove solely?
No, you can amend it if you want to.
It was just to be sure, because obviously I'm aware that there are limits on what we can and can't do within these meetings. So I was just wondering whether the question was just to remove completely, but in consultation with the applicant, we could change it slightly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Is there any other questions? Councillor Bledsoe took mine, so thank you for that. Right, okay, so if there's no other questions, can we just move to councillors? Can we ask Michael if we can just put the guest in the waiting room? Oh, sorry, Mr. Rattor.
Hello, I was just wondering, as we're used to in these hearings, whether there's an opportunity just to do the closing remarks.
Closing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to tell the chair. Yeah. So what happens now, chair? There's closing, and then the applicant then will get the decision by the end of the week.
Right, okay.
So as soon as you've had the opportunity to discuss it, and we can draw up a written decision. Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Rathore.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, firstly, for listening to the presentation, and also your questions, which I thought were very relevant. Now, I just before I go into the closing remarks, there is something that I thought of during the questioning, and that's this: licensing. Much iterative process, and what that means for today's purposes, or in relation to the application generally, is that when an application is made, it is granted, and that's that, unless of course there are objections, and when objections are made which are relevant, then of course we have this hearing, and concerns can be expressed. This is rather an unusual one, because I don't think anybody's disputing there is a question mark whether there is whether the representation is relevant in any event, and whether it was enough to trigger this hearing. That's not criticism of us being here today, but we do need to look at the substance of that. And then from the applicant's point of view, you can see how they might feel a little bit aggrieved, because they'd be thinking, well, if it wasn't for this representation, which really has going on what we're applying for today, it should have just been a rubber stamping exercise without a hearing. So I would ask you to bear that in mind in your deliberations, and from what I've heard, I think you fully understand that anyway, but I'm just emphasizing those points. And so, to moving on to our summing up, this is an application, as Kirsty's said, which the applicant is entitled to have determined on its own merits. The fact that the responsible authorities have not made a representations, or have not suggested any alternative conditions, should be given significant weight. As I say, they are the experts in the relevant licensing objectives, and they are satisfied that the application will promote the licensing objective. The residents' representation is flawed for the reasons we have already mentioned. There is nothing to substantiate their allegations, despite years of complaints and investigations by the authorities. They made accusations without any evidence. There is confusion about what the application is, and they appear to be asking you to grant later hours, which has not been applied for. So very little weight can be given to that, because in fact they've not said anything at all about the application at all. And we also seem to be blamed for things that we would say are not our responsibility and not connected to us, and perhaps the fault lies at the foot of other businesses or the general busyness of that road. I would also suggest that little weight should be given to the representation, very little weight, in addition to it not being relevant to what we're applying for today. They have not turned up to the hearing today to be questioned about their representation. Their evidence, or if we can call it that, it's not been tested. Ours has, and we've engaged in this process. With regard to public nuisance, I would say, had the applicant, the objector, come to us with a log of incidents, a history of investigations by the environmental health officer with evidence that there is a nuisance, only then can you start to address or deal with this matter where there might be a need to impose alternative conditions and not grant this application. Because as I've already said, nuisance is a two-stage process. First, you need robust evidence that there is a problem, and only then can you find or move to the second stage to address that. What are we asking you to do today? We're simply asking you to apply the Licensing Act, the statutory guidance and case law, and also the spirit of the licensing regime, and come to the only logical conclusion, which is to grant the application as applied for. You will know from the guidance that the authority's determination should be evidence-based, justified as being proportionate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. And I would also ask you to take into account, I won't go into detail, but the relevant case law, which talks about the intention of the Licensing Act, which was to be permissive. And if there is no evidence of any problems, businesses should be supported to introduce more flexibility and growth within their businesses. And if there are ever any problems in the future, the officers will no doubt let you know that there are plenty of statutory provisions which they can use to deal with premises if they get to a level which doesn't meet the required standards, but we're nowhere near that. We've got evidence of officers investigating these so-called complaints, and nothing has come up which stands up to scrutiny. And that's all we intend to say in our summing up. And to summarise, this application should be granted as applied for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rethor. Andrea? Andrea, you're muted.
Sorry. So if there's nothing further from the applicant, then you can retire to make your decision. To the applicant, we'll get a written decision to you by the end of business on Friday. But obviously, the earlier that we can do it, the earlier it'll come to you. So that'll be the very latest time.
Okay. Well, is this effectively the end of the meeting, or do we get a verbal decision today?
No, we won't get you'll get a written decision. So it'll involve me now meeting with the members to make the decision, and then I'll have to formulate a written decision for them to all approve.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you.